Movies, the bread and butter of modern entertainment. They're everywhere, in cinemas, on Netflix, even in your own house. Some of them stand as proof of mankind's ability to tell complex, moving stories by using the mixture of writing, acting, and directing, while others exist. But one thing that every movie has in common is that someone made it. There are two possibilities to become that someone. You either need to be an extremely hard-working and skilled individual, preferably after getting an education in this particular field, or you need a lot of money lying around. Bob Gutzion, an American photographer and publisher, was in the former group. At the time, he was known as the creator of an extremely important work of culture, the adult-oriented magazine called Penthouse, a competitor of the legend itself, Playboy. Now he, as a man of culture, had a dream, a calling if you will, to make a movie that will be remembered by many, a movie that will rival Citizen Kane in its craft, a movie that will tell a story that will change the lives of many, a movie simply called Caligula. But, as it happens with some works of art, the movie seemed to be misunderstood by many. Roger Ebert famously described it in his review as sickening, utterly worthless, shameful trash. Ouch. But hey, I'm sure that a man whose magazine was known for such groundbreaking achievements as being the first mainstream publication that showed female pubic hair, anus, and vulva would never produce a movie that thinks it's mature because it has violence and nudity, but really just comes down to a story about a crazy guy ruling a crazy empire who gets killed at the end because people are tired of his shit. But how did a movie of such quality was made, you might ask? How did no one on set realize what they were doing and did not flee while there was still a chance? What in the name of everything that's holy is Malcolm McDowell doing in this movie? Well, my friends, the answers to these questions lie in the tale of Caligula, a 1979 movie, not the real guy. A tale that I'm about to tell. It all started in 1976. Bob Gutzion, for reasons buried deep within the depths of his psyche, decided to create an explicit adult movie with high production values. At this point in America, there was a social movement called the Sexual Revolution. It challenged the traditional view of sexuality, which, at that point, was rarely seen in any other context than a supplement of traditional heterosexual marriage. In this revolution, media played a distinct role. Movies such as Last Tango in Paris, Deep Throat, and The Devil in Miss Jones normalized the concept of pornographic media, even if they usually were made with a very small budget. Bob Gutzion aimed to change that. He wanted his movie to have a grand scope and feature sex scenes, on one hand contributing to this countercultural movement, while also creating a self-contained piece of art rather than another cheap porno movie. Unfortunately, not many people shared his vision, but thanks to the fortune he amassed, he could afford to finance the movie himself. To fulfill this dream, he approached a man named Franco Rossellini, the nephew of a filmmaker Roberto Rossellini. The two gentlemen decided that a movie about the short reign of a Roman emperor Caligula would be perfect to achieve what Gutzion wanted to. But first, someone had to write a script. The producers decided to choose Gore Vidal, a novelist and writer who seemed to be a perfect fit for the job. Next, the search for a director began. The first candidate was John Huston, but according to Gutzion, his agent was greedy and the negotiations fell through. So the producers turned their eyes to Lina Wertmüller, who already had a few noteworthy achievements in the filmmaking field. But she had a very different vision than Gutzion, wanting to give the main role to Jack Nicholson and demanding to scrap the screenplay written by Vidal. This was a bit problematic since Gutzion already paid $200,000 for Vidal's script. So he sought a more cooperative director. And finally, thanks to a friendly meeting over lunch, he met one by the name Tinto Brass. Though Brass was a small-time director compared to the previous candidates, two things placed him above his predecessors in this matter. First, He seemed to understand what the producers wanted to achieve with the movie, but more importantly, he made a movie that Bob Gussion really liked, Salon Kitty. However, Tinto Brass had a bit of a bad reputation among the filmmakers, as he was supposedly very hard to work with, but Gussion thought that the scope of the movie itself, i.e. the amount of money he sank into the project, would keep the naughty director in his seat. So for now, it seemed everything was proceeding smoothly. Gore Vidal finished his script, Gussion and Brass sat down to read it in a comfy warm room and noticed a small problem. The script was contaminated with gay boys.
I'm gay!
See, Vidal wrote a story with many sex scenes, just like Gussion wanted. Only most of these sex scenes had two men participating in them, and the only heterosexual sex scene was between Caligula and his sister. Yeah. So Gussion demanded rewrites. Homosexual elements were toned down, and our pal Bob seemed happy with the result. But Tinto was not. He described the script as the work of an aging arteriosclerotic and started rewriting it on his own. This did not bother Gussion because he wanted the movie to be sexy, knowing that female nudity and heterosexual or occasional lesbian sex would grant it a widespread appeal. But Vidal was not pleased. He held an interview with Time magazine in which he called the director's parasite and said that the dialogue he wrote is now only a background for explicit orgy scenes. In return, Brass and Gussion removed him from the set. In return, Vidal entered a legal dispute to have his name removed from the credits. A spicy drama occurred afterward. Gussion said that he will gladly erase Vidal's name from the credits if the man will stop begging for his 10% share of the movie's profits. Vidal stated that he never said he wanted his 10% and called Brass a megalomaniac. So Brass publicly said that if he'll ever get mad at Vidal, he will publish his script. And then the kindergarten caretaker came and ordered the boys to apologize to each other. But hey, at least the worst part was taken care of before the filming started, so the rest of the movie development could proceed smoothly, right? Now, one thing that certainly is impressive about Caligula is its all-star cast. Malcolm McDowell as the titular Caligula, straight after his big role in Clockwork Orange. An Oscar nominee Peter O'Toole, John Gielgud, whose list of awards on Wikipedia is longer than the list of people I failed in my life. Helen Mirren, who went on to win an Oscar later in her career, and, the cherry on top, Maria Schneider, a very young actress who had the displeasure to star in another half-porn, half-artsy movie, Last Tango in Paris. Not everyone got along. Peter O'Toole supposedly disliked the director from the moment they met, but these sort of things happen all the time, no need for alarm. First day of filming. Maria Schneider was apparently a bit uncomfortable with a skimpy tunic she was supposed to wear on set, so she sewed parts of it to make it a bit less revealing. Our boy Tinto did not like this at all. And Miss Schneider did not like the fact that he did not like it. I think at this point she realized what she was getting herself into, so she decided to abort the mission. And she did it with style by walking out of the set and bad-mouthing the movie and some people involved in it. Fortunately, Mr. Brass had some connections and quickly found a replacement. Teresa Ann Savoy was now to play Caligula's sister, Drusilla. Oof, problem solved. But this situation shined a light on a bigger issue that was starting to surface. As I mentioned before, Tinto Brass had a reputation for being hard to work with. Bob Gussion, on the other hand, had a clear vision of the movie he wanted to make. Both gentlemen seemed to have quite an ego and both wanted to order the other one around. So the production crew quickly divided into two groups, Team Gussion and Team Brass. And as it turned out, both of them wanted to make a completely different movie. Gussion wanted his creation to be sexy and artistic, though as he lacked any actual filmmaking skills, he seemed to choose some weird measures to achieve what he wanted. Brass wanted to make a political satire, a commentary about the despicable life of the rich, building his vision mostly on shock factor that he wanted to achieve by combining the image of Caligula's luxurious life with grotesque sex scenes and excessive violence. All of this was based on Gore Vidal's script, which showed yet another vision, this one telling a story of a good Roman boy who was driven to insanity by obtaining a position he was not ready for. So, the set became a battlefield where the one who was closer to the camera at the moment won. Brass hired ex-convicts, thieves and anarchists to play the roles of Roman senators and noblemen. Gussion brought the Penthouse Pets, his magazine's equivalent of Playboy bunnies, to play the more, explicit roles. He also hired a set designer named Danilo Dolatti, another respected and award-winning artist.
And also because Italy is, and particularly Rome, is the home of Danilo Donati, whom I personally feel, and I think a lot of critics will agree with me, is the very best art director that a film like this could have. Danilo has won at least 3 or 4 Academy Awards. He's probably the finest costume and set designer in the world. And I wanted him. He was part of the package of excellence that we were putting together. And Danilo's a strange guy. It's very difficult to get him outside of Rome.
As if to mock his employer, Brass decided to ignore most of the sets created for the movie and purposefully placed Gussion's Penthouse Pets in the background of every scene so that they were barely visible. And while the two gentlemen were busy arguing, the rest of the cast was left without anyone keeping an eye on their own shenanigans. Here are a few highlights.
Hello, are you running? This is Malcolm McDowell speaking from the set of Gore Vidal's Caligula. And we're now at the end of the film, very nearly. We have another 3 days to go. It's very nearly Christmas and we're all freezing.
Peter O'Toole, who was known as an alcoholic, supposedly stopped drinking before the production started. However, most cast members noticed that he was on something during the filming, and McDowell said in one interview that he caught his colleagues smoking something that was definitely not tobacco. Speaking of Mr. McDowell, during production he took his co-workers to an expensive restaurant to celebrate England's win against Italy in a football match. He made it seem like he would pay for them, but when the time to do the honors drew near, he said that he did not have enough money with him, leaving the movie's choreographer to pay the bill. And this was only one of this actor's many adventures. One day, his car was attacked by a mob of angry extras and production assistants when he arrived on set because no money came in from New York City to pay their weekly salary. During the scene where he had to pee while walking, his dad came by to watch his son at work. He was apparently quite proud of his son, seeing how well he can urinate. Other time, when Mr. Malcolm asked the director why the soldiers invading Britain are naked, he heard the words cock and arse in reply. On the day McDowell had to shoot the sodomy scene with Donato Placido, he noticed his partner's family on set and tried to get them away as fast as possible. And at the very end of shooting, he gave his dresser a cheap pendant to thank her for her work, with her name engraved in it. The only problem was, her name was misspelled, so she gave it back. So McDowell offered her a signet ring that was a prop from the movie, and as you might have guessed, she politely declined. While all of this was happening, the war between Gussion and Brass was nearing an end. On December 24th, 1976, the filming was complete, the crew was ready to leave, Christmas was nearing, and everyone was happy. Except for Bob Gussion. He didn't like how the movie turned out, as it lacked any actually sexy scenes. But Brass didn't want to shoot them. This proved to be a bit of a problem. But hey, who needs a director when you have a camera?
Another particularly good reason for doing this film was because it gave us, as a company, a terrific advantage. And that was of using the beautiful girls that we portray in the magazine, the Penthouse Pets. And indeed, I brought 13 of them to Italy with me. 13 gorgeous girls, 2 of whom were Pets of the Year. And because of the extravagant use of female beauty in any film dealing with the court of the Roman Caesars, this gave us, I think, an advantage over almost anybody else who would be making that kind of a film.
A few weeks after the filming concluded, Tinto Brass was working on editing the movie while Bob Gusion secretly went back to Rome with about a dozen of his penthouse pets and a lone cameraman. With them, he shot about 10 minutes of hardcore unstimulated sex scenes that he could add to his magnum opus. Nice. Now all that was left was to get back to Britain where the movie was being edited and start working. After spending about 9 weeks on editing the movie's first hour, Tinto Brass arrived at work one morning to find that the lock had been changed, summons had been affixed to the door, and his Mammoth Prevost editing machine was sitting outside in the snow. This pretty much meant that he was fired. Gusion finished the editing himself and then returned to America where he could finally unleash his masterpiece to the theaters. And boy, what a premiere it was! So when it comes to me, I have to say that I personally did not like this movie, to put it very delicately. But I'm no professional movie critic and I am spoiled by modern cinematography with its pageant CGI and other luxuries. But professional critics also seem to be a bit disgusted with the end result. Now I couldn't really find any other reviews from the time except for the Roger Ebert one, which was, yeah. So we'll just have to trust Wikipedia that most other critics also did not take kindly to this cinematic adventure. But Bob Gusion had something to say about the critics himself. In an archived interview with a Penthouse reporter, he says this.
Besides, what is a critic? Whether his or her credentials, what gives him the right to make valued judgments on behalf of the public taste? History is filled with their nameless gravestones, while the men and women they spent their lives attacking live on. How many great artists, writers, musicians, etc. can you name? Now how many of their critics can you recall? More often than not, the critic is a failed artist, an incomplete personality, and by some idiotic cultural synergism, he survives by attaching himself to the arts. He is no more than a parasite, a remote observer. Remote because he's on the outside of art, looking in.
But enough talk! How about you?
But critics are critics, right? What about the men and women behind the craft, the artisans that brought us this masterpiece? Well, Tinto Brass and Gore Vidal quickly pursued legal actions in hope to distance themselves from the final product, and Malcolm McDowell said this lovely line after seeing the movie for the first time. I felt like a woman after she's been... yikes. The only positive comment I found on the movie comes from Helen Mirren, who said that it's a mix of art and genitals. I don't know if I would like to spend my $7 on that recommendation, but okay. However, the movie was a success in a certain way. It was shown only in a few theaters handpicked by Bob Gusion himself, as technically it was an independent movie. No studio was involved in its promotion or development. And in those theaters it was a smash hit, breaking most of the records, even though tickets were twice as expensive as when it came to other movies. And though it certainly is an achievement, I don't know if I would be proud of it. Keep in mind that at the time, porn was much harder to come by. And let's just say I'm not entirely sure if the people watching Caligula were all that into the actual art in the movie, if you know what I mean. Speaking of porn, there was one other group of people interested in Caligula, except for its makers and viewers. The censors. See, as it turns out, the movie never got properly rated, since Gusion did not want it to be shuffled amongst porn, as most movies with the X rating back then were proud members of this genre. Now, to his credit, he did give the movie his own rating, MA, meaning mature audience, but he could only really control the censors in America. If he wanted the movie to appear in other countries, it had to undergo some sort of examination, and not everyone shared his artistic vision in this department. Some countries banned the movie altogether, others were forced to remove some more questionable scenes, and to this day at least a few different cuts exist in various parts of the globe. In Brazil, it was split into two parts and shown on public television in 1992, but after protests from the viewers, the second part was never emitted. Now, despite what many critics said about the movie, I think in a way it was able to capture a truly artistic message that becomes clear after you learn the story behind its production. What is this message? Well, I would put it like this. If you're making a movie about a person in position of power who is constantly surrounded by beautiful half-naked women whose sole idea of changing something in the world is adding explicit sex and orgies somewhere where they don't really belong, who constantly gets rid of the people around him far more qualified to do the job he is trying to do, then, well, before sinking $17 million into this project, make sure you are not that person. And with that, I wish you all a fantastic day, and I hope to see you next time.